Racist cops arrest black woman, freeze when they find out she's Secret Service. In a shocking turn of events, this video captures a tense encounter between law enforcement officers and a black woman who turns out to be a Secret Service agent. What starts as a routine stop quickly escalates, exposing underlying racial prejudices that still exist in modern policing. These officers, acting on assumptions rather than facts, find themselves in an unexpected situation when they discover her true identity. If you are enthusiastic about this narrative, please inform us. If you appreciated the video, press 1. If not, select 0. Your feedback genuinely motivates me to collect additional uplifting and significant narratives.
Comfortable and relax. The late afternoon sun hovered low over the quiet suburban neighborhood, casting long, golden streaks across the pavement. Amaya Johnson sat in her SUV, parked along a quiet curb, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the steering wheel. A light breeze stirred the trees lining the street, their branches swaying lazily as if unaware of her growing tension. Her eyes remained fixed on the unassuming house across the street. A two-story home with pale blue shutters and a well-maintained lawn. On the surface, it looked no different from any other house on the block, but Amaya knew better. She'd spent the last 4 days studying its occupants and their routines. The suspect inside was no ordinary suburban resident. He was a cybersecurity contractor suspected of leaking sensitive information to a hostile foreign entity. This mission was classified and critical, and Amaya was here to confirm his movements. The sooner her team had actionable intel, the sooner they could intervene. Amaya glanced at the time on the dashboard, 4:17 p.m. It was always the same with surveillance. Long hours of nothing, followed by moments that could shift everything. She leaned back in the driver's seat, her NSA-issued badge resting in the glove compartment, easily accessible but out of sight. "This is Johnson," she said quietly into her earpiece. "No movement yet, everything's quiet." Her colleague, Agent Collins, replied through the comms. "Copy that? Any signs of our guy?" "Negative," Amaya said, scanning the house again. A curtain in one of the upstairs windows twitched slightly, but nothing more. "We're still on schedule." "Keep us updated," Collins replied. "Will do." Amaya exhaled, taking in the stillness of the neighborhood. Kids rode bikes on the far end of the street, and a woman walked her dog along the sidewalk. It was the type of place where people didn't lock their doors and greeted strangers with polite smiles, at least on the surface. But Amaya had been doing this job long enough to know that danger often hid in plain sight. She reached for the coffee cup in her console and took a sip, grimacing at how lukewarm it had become. Just as she was about to settle in again, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A black and white police cruiser turned onto the street, its tires rolling slowly over the pavement. Amaya's fingers tightened around the cup. Keep calm. Stay focused. She had dealt with situations like this before. Misunderstandings, casual assumptions, or curious neighbors calling in a report of a suspicious car. Most of the time, once she flashed her credentials, the problem disappeared. The cruiser rolled closer, slowing down as it passed her SUV. Amaya kept her expression neutral, pretending not to notice the lingering gazes from the two officers inside. She hoped they would keep moving. They didn't. The patrol car came to a stop a few car lengths behind her, and both officers stepped out. From her rearview mirror, Amaya could see them clearly. The lead officer, Martin Green, was tall and broad, his posture rigid as he adjusted his belt. Beside him was his partner, Lucas Brown, the younger officer who looked far less sure of himself. Lucas's steps were hesitant as he followed Green. "Here we go," Amaya thought, forcing herself to take a slow breath. She unrolled her window as Officer Green approached, his boots echoing on the pavement. Lucas lagged a few steps behind, his gaze darting between Amaya and the house she had been watching. "Afternoon, ma'am," Green said, his voice hard and clipped. He leaned down slightly, resting his hands on the edge of her window. "Mind telling us what you're doing here?" Amaya kept her expression calm. "Good afternoon, officer. I'm just parked here, that's all." Green's brow furrowed, his eyes scanning her car and lingering on her face. "Just parked? We got a call about a suspicious vehicle. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Amaya's jaw tightened. Of course someone had called. "Nothing suspicious here, officer," she replied evenly. "I'm working." If you'll give me a moment, I can show you my identification. Green straightened up slightly, crossing his arms over his chest. Working? Doing what exactly? Amaya hesitated. She couldn't disclose her mission, but she also couldn't afford to escalate the situation. I'm with the government, she said carefully. I have authorization to be here. Green's expression darkened, and Amaya saw the subtle shift in his posture. With the government? That's vague. What agency? Amaya opened her glove compartment slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. She retrieved her NSA credentials and handed them to Green. Amaya Johnson, National Security Agency. Green took the badge, turning it over in his hands as though inspecting it for flaws. Lucas moved closer, peering at the ID before glancing nervously at Green. It looks legitimate, Lucas murmured, but Green ignored him. NSA, huh? He handed the badge back to Amaya, his lips curling into a faint sneer. Funny, I don't see a government vehicle here, or any backup. Why would an NSA agent be parked alone in a neighborhood like this? Amaya met his gaze steadily. I'm not at liberty to discuss that, officer. You've seen my credentials. If you need to verify them, you're welcome to call my agency. Green's jaw twitched as though her calm demeanor irritated him. Ma'am, I'm not in the habit of taking people at their word. Then verify it, Amaya said, her voice cool. I'll wait. Lucas shifted uncomfortably. Martin, maybe we should. Green silenced him with a sharp look. Turning back to Amaya, he leaned in closer, his voice dropping just slightly. You think you're above being questioned just because you flashed some badge? People lie all the time. I don't appreciate your tone, officer, Amaya replied, her patience thinning. I've shown you my credentials. I've been polite. There's no need for this to escalate. Green stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he stepped back. Stay here, he barked, motioning for Lucas to follow him as they walked toward the patrol car. Amaya watched them through her side mirror. Lucas was speaking to Green, his gestures small and uncertain. Green shook his head, his movements sharp, before pulling out his radio and turning his back to her. She leaned back in her seat, exhaling slowly. She'd done everything right, shown her badge, stayed calm, given them no reason to escalate. But still, something about Green's demeanor set off alarm bells in her mind. Minutes passed before Green turned back toward her car, his face set with determination. Lucas hesitated before following. Amaya tensed as they approached, her instincts telling her that this wasn't over. Green's voice was sharper this time, as though he'd already made up his mind. Step out of the vehicle, ma'am. Amaya's stomach dropped, but her face remained calm. Why? I've shown you my identification. You know who I am. Green's expression hardened. Step out, now. Amaya's hand hovered near her earpiece, ready to call for backup. She had hoped this would be a minor misunderstanding, something she could resolve without incident. But now, as Officer Green stared her down, she knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. Amaya Johnson stood on the cracked pavement beside her SUV, her posture straight and composed despite the cold weight of Officer Martin Green's glare. The late afternoon sunlight felt hotter now, an unwelcome spotlight as the tension in the air grew heavier by the second. Across the street, neighbors peeked through curtains and over fences, their eyes narrowing with curiosity. The quiet hum of suburban life had fallen silent. Put your hands on the hood, Green barked, motioning sharply to the front of her vehicle. Amaya's eyebrows furrowed, her calm beginning to chip away at the edges. Excuse me? You heard me, Green snapped. Hands on the hood. I've shown you my credentials, officer, Amaya said firmly, keeping her voice level but clear. There is no justification for this. Green's mouth twisted into a sneer, as though her refusal to cower only added fuel to his fire. Lady, I don't care what badge you flashed. You're acting suspicious, and I'm not buying your story. Now, put your hands on the hood, or I'll do it for you. Amaya's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to let it show. You're making a mistake, she said evenly. Call in my credentials. I'm not resisting. I'm giving you a lawful way to confirm my identity. Lucas Brown, Green's partner, shifted nervously to the side. He had been quiet up until now, his face a mixture of discomfort and uncertainty. He glanced at Green. Maybe we should just verify the badge like she said. Quiet, Lucas, Green snapped over his shoulder. His tone was sharp, cutting through the air like a whip. I'm handling this. Amaya turned her gaze to Lucas, her eyes steady and searching. "You don't have to let this escalate," she said calmly. "You know this isn't right." Lucas hesitated, his mouth opening as if to respond, but Green turned on him, eyes blazing. "You questioning me now?" "No, sir," Lucas muttered, stepping back like a shadow. Green turned back to Amaya, his expression hardening. "Last warning, hands on the hood." Amaya's jaw tightened, the injustice of the situation burning like fire in her chest. She'd done everything by the book, shown her credentials, remained calm, offered cooperation, but it hadn't mattered. Not to men like Green, whose authority was wrapped in prejudice and arrogance. "I'm not resisting," Amaya said carefully, "but I will not comply with unlawful orders." Green's face darkened, his hands moving toward his belt. "All right, you want to play games?" Before Amaya could react, Green grabbed her arm roughly, twisting it behind her back. Pain shot through her shoulder as the cold, unforgiving metal of handcuffs snapped onto her wrists. "Hey!" Amaya hissed, her composure cracking. "This is unlawful. I haven't done anything." Lucas stepped forward. "Martin, I said I'm handling it." Green barked again, his voice booming. He spun Amaya around to face him, his grip on her arm still far too tight. "You want to resist? You want to lie to me? Fine, you're coming with us. Maybe a little time at the station will help you get your story straight." "I'm not resisting," Amaya bit out, glaring at him. "You're abusing your authority, Officer Green, and you'll answer for this." Green leaned in close, his voice low and dripping with contempt. "Lady, you're not the one asking the questions here." As Green shoved her toward the patrol car, Amaya kept her eyes forward, refusing to let him see the pain or anger in her face. Every fiber of her being told her to fight back, to shout, to push, to resist the injustice. But she knew better. She had seen stories like this play out too many times before. A black person asserting their rights could be twisted into aggression, into threatening behavior. And right now, the truth didn't matter. Lucas opened the back door of the patrol car, his face pale and uneasy as he avoided Amaya's gaze. "You're complicit," Amaya said quietly as she slid into the seat. Lucas flinched but said nothing. As the door slammed shut, the sound echoed in Amaya's ears like a closing cell. From inside the vehicle, the world looked warped, distorted by the reinforced glass separating her from the outside. The ride to the station was suffocatingly silent. Green drove with an air of smug satisfaction, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. Lucas sat in the passenger seat, his eyes fixed on the dashboard as though avoiding the rearview mirror at all costs. Amaya sat perfectly still, her wrists aching where the cuffs dug into her skin. The anger simmered beneath the surface, but she forced herself to stay calm. "You'll get through this," she thought. "This is temporary." Finally, unable to hold back any longer, she spoke. "You know this is illegal, Officer Green. I'm on a federal mission, and you're obstructing it. The moment you refused to verify my badge, you crossed a line." Green smirked but didn't look back. "I'll take my chances." Amaya stared at the back of his head, her gaze hard. "You're digging yourself into a hole you won't get out of." "Is that a threat?" Green taunted, his voice laced with sarcasm. "Because last I checked, you're not in a position to threaten anyone. It's a fact." Amaya replied evenly. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." By the time they reached the precinct, Amaya's frustration was at a boiling point. Green parked the cruiser and opened the door, pulling her out far rougher than necessary. Lucas trailed behind, his shoulders slumped, his discomfort evident. Inside, the station was bustling with activity. Officers milled about, paperwork and conversations filling the air. As Green led Amaya through the main room, heads turned. She could feel the weight of their stares, the murmurs that followed them. "Another one," someone muttered under their breath. Amaya ignored it, her chin held high as Green escorted her into a small interrogation room. The walls were bare except for a single flickering light above the table. The room felt cold and sterile, the type of place designed to break people down. Green shoved her into a chair and stood over her, arms crossed, his shadow stretching across the table. Lucas lingered near the doorway, his face unreadable. "You're going to tell me what you were really doing there," Green said, his voice low and threatening. Amaya met his glare without flinching. "You are obstructing a federal investigation, Officer Green. This is going to come back on you." Green's lip curled. "You think throwing around your fake credentials is going to scare me?" No one's above the law, not even you. Amaya's fists clenched beneath the table. She opened her mouth to respond, but Lucas interrupted quietly. Martin, maybe we should. I told you to stay out of it. Green snapped, shooting Lucas a glare. Lucas fell silent again, but Amaya noticed the hesitation in his eyes. There's still a chance, she thought. Lucas wasn't as far gone as Green, and that hesitation might mean something. For now, though, she had to bide her time. She couldn't let Green break her, no matter how hard he tried. As the door slammed shut behind Lucas, leaving her alone with Green, Amaya sat tall in her chair, staring straight ahead. She wasn't afraid of him, but she knew this was far from over. The interrogation room was uncomfortably cold, the harsh fluorescent lights casting stark shadows on the dull gray walls. Amaya Johnson sat at the small metal table, her wrists still cuffed, though her calm demeanor hadn't wavered. Across from her, Officer Martin Green loomed like a storm cloud, his expression a mix of smug satisfaction and thinly veiled hostility. Amaya met his glare head-on. She wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of seeing her intimidated. Let's go over this again, Green said, his tone dripping with condescension. What exactly were you doing in that neighborhood? Amaya took a slow breath, forcing herself to remain steady. I've told you already, I'm an NSA agent. I was working an active operation, and you interfered. Green's lips twisted into a mockery of a smile. You expect me to believe that? He leaned forward, his hands planted on the table. Lady, I've seen better fake badges sold on the corner of 5th Street. It's not fake, Amaya said firmly. You could have verified it. Instead, you chose to escalate the situation and detain me unlawfully. You're obstructing a federal investigation, and the longer you keep me here, the worse it's going to be for you. Green chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. Listen to you, acting like you're in charge here. You're not. You're nobody. Amaya felt the heat of anger coil in her chest, but she forced it down. She couldn't let Green provoke her into a reaction. She knew that's exactly what he wanted. He wanted her to break, to give him any reason to justify his behavior. The door opened with a sharp creak, and Officer Lucas Brown stepped inside. He looked visibly uncomfortable, his eyes darting between Amaya and Green. Lucas had been quiet since they arrived at the station, his unease growing with every passing moment. Martin, Lucas said cautiously, I think we need to double-check her credentials. She's been saying she's with the NSA. What if she's telling the truth? Green turned sharply, his face darkening as though Lucas had just committed a betrayal. What did I tell you, Lucas? I've got this. Lucas hesitated, shifting from one foot to the other. I'm just saying, if she's legit and we're holding her without cause, then it's her word against ours. Green snapped, cutting him off. We're the ones in uniform here. You want to believe her story? Look at her. Does she look like a government agent to you? Amaya's head snapped up at his words, her glare sharp as ice. What does a government agent look like, Officer Green? Green turned back to her, his lip curling. Not like you. The words hit her like a slap, but Amaya didn't let it show. She'd heard variations of this sentiment before. To men like Green, her competence, her professionalism, and her presence in spaces they didn't think she belonged were somehow unimaginable. Lucas, Amaya said, her voice cutting through the tension. You know this isn't right. You can feel it. Run my credentials. Verify my badge. If I'm lying, you'll know. But if I'm telling the truth, and I am, then you're complicit in unlawful detainment. Lucas hesitated, looking at her, then back at Green. Don't listen to her, Green barked. She's just trying to manipulate you. She doesn't need to manipulate anyone, Lucas said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. If she's telling the truth, we're the ones in the wrong. Green's face reddened with fury. Step outside, Lucas, he ordered, pointing toward the door. Lucas didn't move right away. For a moment, Amaya thought he might actually stand his ground, but then his shoulders sagged, and he left the room without another word. The door closed behind him with a dull thud, leaving Amaya alone with Green once more. Green stared at Amaya for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a small smirk, he pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. You think you're clever, don't you? He sneered. Throwing around titles and badges, acting like you're untouchable. Amaya met his gaze steadily. I don't think I'm untouchable, Officer Green, but I do know the law and you've violated it. You're only making this worse for yourself. Green leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. People like you always think you're smarter than everyone else, always trying to play the victim when things don't go your way. Amaya's jaw tightened. People like me? You mean black women who've worked hard, earned their positions, and refused to let men like you abuse their power? Green's face twisted in anger, but before he could respond, there was a knock at the door. He stood abruptly, muttering under his breath as he opened it just enough to slip outside. Amaya exhaled and closed her eyes for a moment, her mind racing. She needed to stay calm and buy time. Lucas was her only hope right now, and if he was on the fence, she needed him to act. The NSA team monitoring her would notice her silence soon enough. Surveillance protocol would trigger a response. They'd come looking for her. She just had to hold on. Outside the room, Lucas stood with his arms crossed, waiting for Green. "Martin, we need to talk." "About what?" Green snapped. Lucas's voice dropped, his discomfort clear. "I ran her badge when you weren't looking. It's real, Martin. She's telling the truth." Green's face froze, then darkened. "What did you just say?" "You heard me. She's an NSA agent. I called it in. Her credentials checked out." Green grabbed Lucas's arm roughly, dragging him further down the hall so no one could hear. "Are you out of your mind? You went behind my back?" "This isn't about you," Lucas said firmly, his voice gaining strength. "We're holding a federal agent against her will. Do you know how serious that is?" Green's hand tightened into a fist. "We are not letting her walk out of here and make fools of us. You get it? You keep your mouth shut, and this stays between us." Lucas pulled his arm free, his face pale but resolute. "This is wrong, Martin. I won't be part of it." Green grabbed him again, his voice a harsh whisper. "You'll do exactly as I say, or I'll make sure your career ends before it starts. You think anyone's going to believe you over me?" Lucas stared at him, his jaw working as he struggled to respond. Finally he turned and walked away, his face etched with uncertainty. Back in the room, Amaya sat still, her ears straining to pick up any conversation outside. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling longer than the last. She glanced at the camera in the corner of the ceiling, knowing someone on the other end might be watching. Suddenly, the door swung open, and Green stormed back inside, his face thunderous. "Looks like you're going to be here for a while," he said, his voice cold and sharp. "Let's see if you're still feeling smart after a few hours." Amaya tilted her head slightly, her gaze unwavering. "I'll wait. But you won't like what happens next, Officer Green." Green smirked as though unconcerned, but Amaya saw the faint flicker of doubt behind his eyes. He knew this was spiraling out of his control, but he wasn't willing to admit it. As the door slammed shut once more, Amaya straightened in her seat. She had no doubt her team was already on their way. Martin Green thought he held all the power, but he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Officer Lucas Brown sat at his desk in the Cedar Heights precinct, staring blankly at his computer screen. Around him, the station buzzed with activity, phones ringing, officers chatting, paperwork being shuffled, but Lucas couldn't focus. His mind replayed the scene from earlier. Amaya Johnson sitting calmly in the interrogation room, handcuffed despite doing nothing wrong, while Martin Green barked orders and gloated as though she were a criminal. Lucas shifted uncomfortably in his chair, guilt coiling in his chest. He glanced at the hallway leading to the interrogation rooms. Green was still in there with Amaya, undoubtedly continuing his power trip. Lucas knew what they were doing was wrong. Amaya had presented her credentials, legitimate credentials, and Green had refused to verify them until Lucas took matters into his own hands. Now, with confirmation that Amaya was indeed a senior NSA agent, Lucas felt sick to his stomach. His conscience nagged at him like a relentless drumbeat. 2 hours earlier, Lucas had quietly called in Amaya's identification through the NSA verification line, something Green had deliberately avoided. The answer had been immediate. Her credentials were real. She was exactly who she claimed to be, and the fact that they were detaining her was nothing short of unlawful. Lucas had confronted Green in the hallway after discovering the truth. "She's an NSA agent, Martin," Lucas had said firmly, holding up the confirmation. "We're in the wrong here." Green's face had darkened like a thundercloud. "You went behind my back?" "You gave me no choice," Lucas shot back. She's innocent, and we're holding her like some criminal. You have to let her go before this gets worse. Green had stepped closer, his voice a harsh whisper. Listen to me, rookie. This stays quiet. Do you understand? If anyone finds out about this, you and I are done. You'll be lucky to work security at a mall. You think this is about my career? Lucas had asked, incredulous. This is bigger than us, Martin. You crossed a line. Green's eyes had narrowed. You're soft, Brown. That's your problem. You don't get it yet, but you will. People like her think they can walk all over us. Not today. Lucas had stared at Green in disbelief, the weight of those words sinking in. People like her. It wasn't the first time he'd heard Martin talk like that, but this was different. This wasn't some offhand comment or joke. This was deliberate abuse of power. Martin, Lucas had said quietly, trying one last time to reason with him, you need to stop this. Green had smirked and walked back into the interrogation room without another word, leaving Lucas standing in the hallway, torn between his loyalty to the badge and his duty to do the right thing. Now, as Lucas sat at his desk, his hands clenched into fists, he knew he couldn't ignore this. Green had stepped over a line, and Lucas had been complicit by staying silent for too long. He glanced at the clock, 7:42 p.m. Hours had passed since Amaya had been dragged into that interrogation room, and she was still in there. Green had made sure to handle it himself, locking her in without any formal charges or evidence. Lucas pushed back from his desk abruptly, earning a glance from his colleague across the aisle. He ignored it and strode toward the captain's office, his heart pounding in his chest. Come in, Captain Rhonda Keller said when Lucas knocked. Captain Keller was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She was known for running a tight ship, but Lucas didn't know how she'd respond to this. He took a deep breath and stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Officer Brown, she said, raising an eyebrow. What can I do for you? Captain, Lucas began, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. I need to report something. Serious. Keller set down the file she'd been reviewing and leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. Go on. Lucas hesitated for only a moment before diving in. Earlier today, Officer Green and I responded to a call about a suspicious vehicle. The woman we encountered, Amaya Johnson, showed us her credentials. She's a senior NSA agent, ma'am. Her badge is legitimate, but Officer Green refused to verify it and arrested her anyway. Captain Keller's expression shifted from neutral to sharp. You're telling me we have a federal agent in custody? Yes, ma'am, Lucas said, his voice firm. Green has been holding her for hours without cause. I verified her identity myself. She's exactly who she says she is. Keller's jaw tightened. Why didn't I hear about this sooner? Martin told me not to say anything, Lucas admitted, his voice dropping slightly. He told me to keep quiet. But this isn't right, Captain. She's innocent, and he's abusing his power. The room fell silent for a moment, Keller's sharp gaze locking onto Lucas. Finally, she stood. Follow me, she said briskly. Martin Green's voice echoed down the hallway as Captain Keller and Lucas approached the interrogation room. They could hear him talking to Amaya, his tone mocking and dismissive. You think anyone's going to back you up? Green sneered. You're nobody. The NSA doesn't care about you. You're on your own here. Lucas felt his hands curl into fists as the captain pushed the door open. Officer Green, Captain Keller's voice rang out like a gunshot. Green froze mid-sentence, his face going pale as he turned to face Keller. Captain, That's enough, Keller snapped, her tone razor-sharp. Uncuff Agent Johnson, now. Green's face turned red with anger, but he knew better than to argue. He yanked the handcuff key from his belt and begrudgingly released Amaya's wrists. Amaya stood slowly, rubbing her sore wrists as she looked at Captain Keller. Thank you, she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. Keller nodded and turned to Lucas. Officer Brown, please escort Agent Johnson to the conference room. I'll join you shortly. Lucas gave Amaya a small nod. This way, ma'am, he said quietly, holding the door open for her. As Amaya walked past Green, she met his glare head-on. This isn't over, she said, her voice low but powerful. Green said nothing, but his jaw clenched so tightly it looked as though it might snap. Lucas led Amaya down the hallway in silence, his mind racing as he tried to process what had just happened. He had finally done the right thing, but at what cost? Martin Green wouldn't forget this betrayal, and Lucas knew his career might suffer because of it. "You didn't have to step up back there," Amaya said quietly as they reached the empty conference room. "But you did. Thank you." Lucas glanced at her, his expression tight. "It was the right thing to do. I'm sorry it took me so long to act." Amaya gave him a small measured nod. "It's not too late to fix it." Lucas wasn't sure what she meant, but before he could ask, Captain Keller entered the room, a folder in hand. "Agent Johnson," Keller said, her voice firm. "I need to formally apologize for the treatment you received in this station. We'll be conducting a full investigation into Officer Green's conduct." Amaya met her gaze, her expression unreadable. "I appreciate that, Captain, but this goes beyond one officer. What happened today is a symptom of a much bigger problem, and I intend to address it." Lucas glanced at her, a chill running down his spine. For the first time, he realized that this wasn't just about Martin Green. This was the beginning of something much bigger. Officer Lucas Brown sat in the empty break room of the precinct, a cold cup of coffee untouched in front of him. The hum of the vending machine was the only sound in the room, but it did nothing to settle his nerves. Hours had passed since Amaya Johnson had been released, and the fallout was already starting to ripple through the department. Captain Rhonda Keller had wasted no time launching an internal review into Officer Martin Green's conduct. And while Green was putting on a face of defiance, Lucas knew the man was seething. Martin had a reputation for skirting the line when it came to authority, but this time he'd stepped too far, and Lucas couldn't pretend it didn't happen. Lucas tapped his fingers anxiously on the table, his mind whirling. His decision to verify Amaya's credentials behind Martin's back had been a turning point, but it hadn't been enough. He knew the truth about what happened, and for the first time he felt an obligation to do something about it. Amaya's words from earlier rang in his head. "You don't have to let this escalate. You know this isn't right." He'd stayed quiet for too long, and now it was eating him alive. Out in the hallway, Martin Green's booming voice shattered the break room's stillness. "This is a joke. You're seriously questioning my judgment because of some woman flashing a badge? I did my job." Lucas winced, listening as Martin's voice carried down the hall. He stood up and peeked out of the break room door, watching as Green argued with Captain Keller near her office. "You crossed a line, Martin," Keller said firmly. "Her credentials were valid, and you ignored them. That's unlawful detainment, and you're going to answer for it." Martin's face was red with fury. "You're taking her side over mine? I did what I thought was necessary." "What you thought was necessary?" Keller repeated sharply. "You detained a federal agent and refused to verify her credentials. You're lucky this isn't worse." Green's eyes darted toward Lucas, who lingered near the corner. "Oh, I see how this works," he spat. "This is all because of you, Brown. You went behind my back." Lucas froze as Martin stormed toward him, his boots thudding against the tile. "You think you're some kind of hero, huh? Running to the captain like a snitch?" "Enough," Keller barked, stepping between them. "Officer Brown did the right thing. You're out of line, Green." Martin glared at Lucas, his expression venomous. "You'll regret this," he muttered before stomping off toward the locker room. Keller turned to Lucas, her face softer but still serious. "Don't let him get to you, Brown. You did what needed to be done." Lucas nodded, though his heart was still pounding. "Thank you, Captain." "Get back to work," she said. "I'll keep you updated on the investigation." Lucas turned back toward the break room, but he knew the confrontation with Martin wasn't the end of this. That evening, Lucas sat in his small apartment, staring at his laptop screen as he debated his next move. The precinct's investigation would take time, but Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than Martin's behavior. Something didn't add up. He pulled up Amaya Johnson's name, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He hadn't spoken to her since she'd been released, but he knew he had to. Taking a deep breath, he dialed her number. The line rang twice before Amaya's calm voice came through. "This is Johnson." "Agent Johnson, it's Lucas Brown," he said, his voice careful. I need to talk to you." There was a brief pause. "Go on." Lucas hesitated, his guilt threatening to choke him. "I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything that happened. Martin was out of line and I should have acted sooner." "You did the right thing eventually," Amaya replied evenly. Why are you calling now? Lucas ran a hand through his hair. Because I think there's more to this. Martin didn't just act out of prejudice, he's covering for something. I overheard him talking to someone on the phone after you were released. He mentioned keeping things quiet and not letting it blow back. I don't know who he was talking to, but it didn't sit right with me. On the other end of the line, Amaya's tone shifted slightly. Her interest peaked. Did he say anything specific? Not much, Lucas admitted, but I think someone higher up is protecting him. Martin's always been reckless, but he's never acted like this. It's like he knew he could get away with it. Amaya was silent for a moment before she said, "You might be onto something. I've dealt with officers like Green before, but they're usually symptoms of a larger problem. If someone's backing him, we need to find out who." Lucas swallowed hard. "What do you want me to do?" "Get me everything you can on Martin Green," Amaya said. "Internal files, disciplinary records, anything that looks suspicious. I'll take care of the rest." Lucas's stomach tightened. "If I do this, I'm risking my career." "Sometimes doing the right thing comes at a cost," Amaya said. "But you already know that, Officer Brown." Lucas closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. "I'll do it." The next morning, Lucas arrived at the precinct early, his mind racing as he prepared to follow through on his promise. He knew accessing internal records without permission was risky, but he couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in his gut. Something about Martin's actions didn't make sense, and Lucas was done turning a blind eye. He logged into his computer, glancing around the empty office to ensure no one was watching. Pulling up Martin Green's personnel file, he scanned through years of service records, commendations, and routine evaluations. On the surface, it was clean, almost too clean. Then Lucas found it. Buried in the disciplinary history were records of past complaints filed against Martin: excessive force, racial profiling, verbal abuse. Every complaint had been marked unsubstantiated or quietly dismissed. Lucas's stomach turned as he kept scrolling. It wasn't just a pattern, it was a cover-up. Someone had been protecting Martin for years, wiping away his mistakes and keeping him in uniform. Brown. Lucas nearly jumped out of his skin at the sound of Green's voice. He looked up to see Martin standing by his desk, arms crossed and eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here so early?" Green asked, his tone suspicious. "Just catching up on paperwork," Lucas replied quickly, minimizing the screen. Martin stared at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Don't think I don't know what you're up to," he said quietly. "You think you're better than me? You're not. Watch your step, Brown." Lucas forced himself to meet Martin's gaze. "Is that a threat?" Martin smirked. "Take it however you want." As he walked away, Lucas felt a chill run through him. Martin wasn't just dangerous, he was emboldened, and whoever was protecting him was even more powerful. Lucas turned back to his screen, copying the files he'd found onto a flash drive. He knew what he had to do. It was time to blow this wide open. The hum of Amaya Johnson's laptop filled the small, sterile meeting room she'd taken over at the NSA field office. Documents flashed across her screen. Internal police reports, disciplinary records, and financial transactions that Officer Lucas Brown had sent her. The deeper she dug into Martin Green's history, the clearer the pattern became. This wasn't just about one rogue officer. Amaya leaned back in her chair, her mind racing as the pieces began to fall into place. Green wasn't just acting recklessly because of unchecked authority. He was being protected by a network of individuals embedded in law enforcement. The records Lucas had risked his career to provide hinted at something much larger: systemic corruption stretching beyond Cedar Heights. She picked up her phone and dialed Lucas's number. It rang twice before he picked up. "Lucas," Amaya said without preamble, "I need you to meet me. This goes deeper than Green." Lucas's voice came through, low and uneasy. "What do you mean?" "I've been going through the files you sent. Green's history of misconduct didn't just disappear, it was erased. Someone in the system has been covering for him, and I have a strong suspicion it's tied to outside influences." There was a pause. "You mean like a group?" "Exactly," Amaya replied. "A shadow organization manipulating law enforcement from the inside. They're protecting officers like Green, encouraging abuse of power, and keeping people like me out of their way." Lucas's voice was cautious. "Why would anyone want to do that?" "Because chaos serves them," Amaya said firmly. The more fractured the system, the easier it is for people in the shadows to manipulate it. Lucas let out a breath. Where do we start? I need you to meet me, Amaya said. Bring anything else you've got. We're going to connect the dots. Lucas Brown parked his car 2 blocks away from the nondescript government building where Amaya had asked him to meet. He sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel as he stared out at the empty lot. Every instinct told him this was dangerous, that working with Amaya put a target on his back. Martin Green's threats still echoed in his mind. You'll regret this. But Lucas knew he couldn't turn back now. If he stayed silent, he'd be no better than Green and the people protecting him. He grabbed the manila folder filled with more documents he'd quietly gathered from the precinct and stepped out of the car. The lobby of the NSA field office was as imposing as he'd expected. Gray walls, no windows, and a security checkpoint manned by stern-looking guards. He gave his name and they directed him to the 3rd floor. When he entered the meeting room, Amaya was already waiting, her expression sharp and focused. Officer Brown, she greeted, offering him a slight nod. Call me Lucas, he said, setting the folder on the table. You've got something, don't you? Amaya opened the folder he'd brought, flipping through its contents as she spoke. Your files helped confirm a suspicion I've had since my detainment. Green's not just a bad cop, he's part of a larger machine. The people protecting him are well-funded, powerful, and organized. Lucas shifted uneasily in his chair. What exactly are we talking about here? Look at this. Amaya turned her laptop toward him, displaying a series of linked records. Green's disciplinary reports didn't just disappear. They were intentionally buried. Every officer who filed a complaint against him was either reassigned, discredited, or intimidated into silence. She clicked to another screen. And it doesn't stop there. I traced financial transactions made to offshore accounts under shell corporations. These accounts are connected to police unions, private donors, and certain law firms. Someone is funneling money to shield officers like Green and ensure they stay in power. Lucas's mouth went dry. You're saying there's a network protecting bad cops? Yes, Amaya said. But it's not just about protecting them, it's about control. This group infiltrates police departments, manipulates investigations, and spreads fear to keep officers in line. Officers like Green are their pawns, but they're useful because they keep communities divided and distracted. Lucas leaned back in his chair, rubbing his hands over his face. This is insane. How did we not see this before? Because they're careful, Amaya said. They know how to cover their tracks. But thanks to your files, we've got enough breadcrumbs to start pulling the pieces together. Lucas looked at her, determination hardening his voice. What do we do now? Back at the Cedar Heights Police Department, Martin Green paced his office, his mind racing. The internal review Captain Keller had launched was putting unwanted attention on him. Worse, Lucas Brown's betrayal had thrown everything into chaos. He'd made a call to his contacts earlier, people who could clean up the situation, but he hadn't heard back yet. That made him uneasy. The people he worked for didn't tolerate loose ends, and right now, Green was dangerously close to becoming one himself. If they think I can't control this, they'll cut me loose. His phone buzzed on his desk and he snatched it up. The voice on the other end was curt. You've let this get out of hand, Martin. I can fix it, Green said quickly, sweat beading on his brow. The rookie doesn't have anything. I'll take care of it. You better, the voice replied coldly. If this blows up, you'll be the first to fall. The line went dead, and Green slammed the phone down, cursing under his breath. He had to act fast. Meanwhile, Amaya and Lucas sat in the dimly lit meeting room, piecing together the evidence. There's a pattern here, Amaya said, pointing to a highlighted series of names. Officers with histories of misconduct get protected, while whistleblowers or good cops get silenced. Whoever's behind this has influence at multiple levels: police leadership, legal offices, maybe even local politicians. Lucas nodded grimly. So how do we expose it? Amaya met his gaze. We take this evidence to someone who can't ignore it. The media, federal investigators, anyone who's untouchable. But first we need more proof. These financial records are good, but we need a direct link. Lucas frowned. What about Martin? He's reckless. If we put pressure on him, he might give up his contacts. Amaya considered this. It's risky, but it might work. Green knows he's in too deep, and that makes him dangerous. If we're not careful, he'll try to cover his tracks, probably by targeting us. Lucas swallowed hard. You think he'll come after me? Amaya's expression was grim. You've already put a target on your back by coming to me. Green won't forgive that, and neither will the people backing him. You need to be prepared for that. Lucas's face was pale, but he nodded. If it means stopping this, I'll do it. Amaya closed her laptop and stood, offering him a small but firm smile. You've done the right thing, Lucas. We're going to see this through. As they left the meeting room, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was just beginning. Green wouldn't go quietly, and the shadow organization he'd helped uncover wouldn't stand by and let their secrets come to light. But for the first time, Lucas felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. This fight wasn't just about Amaya, Green, or even himself. It was about exposing the corruption that had poisoned the system, and he was ready to face whatever came next. As Amaya drove back to her apartment that night, her phone buzzed with a new text message from an unknown number. You don't know who you're dealing with. Stop now, or you'll regret it. Amaya stared at the message, her jaw tightening. She knew the threats would come. That was the cost of confronting people who thought they were untouchable. But she also knew one thing for certain. They'd underestimated her. They have no idea who they're dealing with. The air in Lucas Brown's apartment was thick with unease. The blinds were shut, and the room was lit only by the pale glow of his laptop screen. Sweat beaded on his brow as he scrolled through the files Amaya had sent him, his pulse quickening with each damning revelation. This wasn't just a single officer's misconduct. This was a conspiracy that reached higher than he'd ever imagined. Names of shell corporations, suspicious financial transactions, and ghost donors connected the dots. The shadow network Amaya had warned him about was real, its reach sprawling across multiple law enforcement agencies. And Martin Green? He was just a pawn. A dangerous one, but a pawn nonetheless. Lucas sat back, running his hand through his hair. He couldn't shake the nagging feeling that his life was teetering on the edge of disaster. By helping Amaya, he had crossed an invisible line. The people protecting Green wouldn't let this slide. A sudden thud at the door made Lucas jump. He froze, staring at the entrance to his apartment. Then came the knocking, loud, deliberate. Lucas. A voice barked from the other side. It was Martin Green. Lucas's blood ran cold. He stood slowly, his heart hammering in his chest. What do you want, Martin? He called, trying to steady his voice. You think I don't know what you're up to? Green snarled. Open the door. Lucas hesitated, glancing back at his laptop. If Green had any idea what he'd been uncovering, this wouldn't end well. I don't have anything to say to you, Lucas replied, his voice firm. Green pounded his fist against the door. You think you're a hero? Huh? Running around with that federal agent, sticking your nose where it doesn't belong? You don't know who you're dealing with, kid. Leave, Martin, Lucas said sharply. The door fell silent for a moment. Then Martin's voice dropped to a menacing whisper. You're making a mistake, Brown. These people, they don't forgive. You still have a choice. Back out now, and I'll make this all go away. Lucas clenched his fists, anger bubbling to the surface. I'm not backing down, Martin. Not this time. A long silence followed, then the sound of footsteps retreating down the hallway. Lucas let out a shaky breath, his hands trembling. He knew this wasn't over. Martin's threats weren't idle, and Lucas had no doubt he was being watched. Meanwhile, Amaya Johnson was sitting in the brightly lit war room of the NSA field office, surrounded by a small team of analysts. Documents and maps covered the walls, detailing the connections they had uncovered within the police department and beyond. The evidence was damning, but there was still one piece missing, something that tied Martin Green and his handlers directly to the broader network. Amaya's phone buzzed, pulling her attention away from the board. It was Lucas. Agent Johnson, Lucas said quickly, his voice shaky. Green showed up at my apartment. Amaya sat up straight. Are you okay? I'm fine, for now, but he's not backing down. He's threatening me, saying I don't know what I'm getting into. Amaya's jaw tightened. You need to get somewhere safe, Lucas. Green isn't working alone. If he feels cornered, he'll come after you. I'm not running, Lucas said firmly, though there was a hint of fear in his voice. This has to stop. I'm in this now, for better or worse. Amaya admired his resolve, but she knew how dangerous the situation was becoming. Listen to me. Send me everything you have, documents, notes, anything you've uncovered. Then pack a bag and get out of there. I'll arrange for someone to watch your back. Got it? Lucas replied before hanging up. Amaya set the phone down, her mind racing. She couldn't afford to let this fall apart now. They were close, too close to the truth for the Shadow organization to ignore. Green was desperate, and desperate people were unpredictable. An hour later, Lucas sat in his car parked a few blocks from the police precinct. He had forwarded everything to Amaya, every last piece of evidence he'd uncovered about Martin Green's connections and the network shielding him. But Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to confront Green himself. He knew it was reckless, but part of him wanted to see the man squirm. Lucas took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, walking into the station. The air inside felt heavier than usual, as though everyone could sense the storm brewing just beneath the surface. Officers shot him curious glances as he passed, but no one stopped him. Green was at his desk typing something on his computer when Lucas walked up. "What do you want, Brown?" Green said, not even looking up. "I want you to know it's over," Lucas replied. His voice was steady, though his pulse raced. "I know everything. So does Agent Johnson. We have the files, the financial records, all of it. Your time's up, Martin." Green froze, his fingers halting mid-keystroke. Slowly, he looked up at Lucas, his face a mask of simmering rage. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, I do," Lucas said, leaning closer. "You're not untouchable. Not anymore." Green's eyes flickered with something Lucas had never seen before, fear. For a split second, the mask cracked, and Lucas knew he was right. Martin wasn't in control anymore. He was a cornered animal. "You're done," Lucas said softly. "Walk away now, and maybe you'll save what little dignity you have left." Green stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Get out of my face, Brown. You have no idea what you're dealing with." "I know enough," Lucas shot back, "and so do the people who are coming for you." For a moment, the two men locked eyes, Green's face dark with fury, Lucas's expression calm and resolute. Then Lucas turned and walked away, his heart pounding in his ears. As he stepped outside, the cool evening air hit him, and he allowed himself a shaky breath. He knew Green wouldn't take this lying down, but he also knew he'd struck a nerve. For the first time, Lucas felt like he was holding the upper hand. Back at the NSA office, Amaya watched her team finalize the presentation of evidence. "We're almost there," her lead analyst said. "If we can confirm one more link, we'll have enough to take this to the Justice Department." Amaya nodded. "Good. Let's move quickly. The longer this drags out, the more time they'll have to cover their tracks." Her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous text message. "Back off, or you'll regret it." Amaya stared at the message for a moment before deleting it. The threats were growing more frequent, but they didn't scare her. If anything, they told her she was getting closer to the truth. "Agent Johnson," one of her analysts called. "We've got something." Amaya turned to face the screen as a series of financial links appeared. The final connection lit up, tying Green and his protectors directly to a shadowy shell company suspected of influencing police departments across the country. Amaya's eyes narrowed. "That's it." She grabbed her phone and dialed Lucas. "We've got them." Lucas's voice was quiet but steady. "What now?" "Now," Amaya replied, a hint of steel in her voice. "We bring this whole thing crashing down." The battle wasn't over, but the tide was turning. For Martin Green and the people pulling his strings, the reckoning had begun. The sun was just beginning to rise, its soft glow painting the Cedar Heights Police Department in shades of gold and orange. The building, which had been the epicenter of Amaya Johnson's unlawful detention and Officer Lucas Brown's moral awakening, now stood poised at the edge of reckoning. Inside its walls, the weight of everything that had been uncovered was about to come crashing down. Amaya stood in the conference room of the NSA's field office, surrounded by her team and federal agents. Screens lined the walls, filled with evidence. Financial records, internal emails, hidden disciplinary files, and links to the shadow network that had been manipulating police departments across multiple states. At the center of it all was Martin Green and the web of corruption he represented. Amaya's phone buzzed, pulling her attention. It was Lucas. "They're here," Lucas said quietly, his voice steady but strained. Green doesn't know yet, but the feds just walked into the precinct. It's happening. Stay calm, Amaya replied, her voice firm. You've done your part, Lucas. Let them handle it now. Yeah, Lucas muttered. I hope this works. It will, Amaya assured him. We've got the truth on our side. At the Cedar Heights precinct, the scene was controlled chaos. Plainclothes FBI agents and federal investigators swept into the station with precise efficiency. Captain Rhonda Keller stood near the entrance, her expression unreadable as she watched the agents move through the building, folders and subpoenas in hand. Lucas sat at his desk, watching the operation unfold with equal parts relief and dread. He had risked everything to get to this point, but it wasn't over yet. Across the room, Martin Green burst out of his office, his face twisted with confusion and rage. What the hell is going on? Green barked, storming up to Keller. Who let them in here? Stand down, Martin, Keller said coldly. What do you mean, stand down? Green snapped. This is my precinct. I want answers. You'll get them soon enough, a voice cut in. Green turned sharply to see Special Agent Daniel Morgan from the FBI, flanked by 2 agents carrying folders. Daniel's gaze was hard as steel as he stepped forward, his badge glinting in the overhead lights. Officer Green, Daniel said calmly, you are under investigation for misconduct, unlawful detainment, tampering with records, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Green's face drained of color. What? This is ridiculous. I haven't done anything wrong. Daniel ignored him and nodded to one of the agents. Cuff him. This is a mistake, Green yelled, backing away as the agents advanced. You can't do this. I'm a cop. You were a cop, Keller said, her voice cold, but not anymore. As the agents handcuffed Green, Lucas felt a strange sense of satisfaction, one tempered by the gravity of the moment. Green's arrogance had finally met its match, but the damage he'd caused would take far longer to repair. Brown. Green's voice cracked like a whip, his eyes blazing with desperation as he was dragged past Lucas's desk. This is your fault? You think you've won? You haven't won anything. Lucas held Green's gaze, unflinching. No, Martin, he said evenly. You lost the moment you thought no one would hold you accountable. Green's words devolved into curses as he was pulled out of the precinct, leaving behind a silence that felt louder than any shouting. Hours later, Lucas met Amaya outside the courthouse, where reporters and onlookers had already gathered. Camera flashes flickered in the early afternoon light as news of Green's arrest spread like wildfire. Amaya stood with her hands in the pockets of her tailored blazer, her expression composed but resolute. Good work today, Officer Brown, Amaya said as Lucas approached. Thanks, Lucas replied, exhaling deeply. Green's finally off the streets. It still feels surreal. It's more than just Green, Amaya said, turning to face him fully. The evidence we uncovered shows this network reaches far beyond him. Corruption thrives in silence, Lucas. You broke that silence. Lucas shifted uncomfortably. I just did what was right. Amaya gave him a small, approving smile. Sometimes doing what's right makes you a target, but you stood your ground when it mattered most. That takes courage. Lucas looked down at the ground for a moment before meeting her eyes. What happens now? Amaya gestured toward the courthouse steps, where federal investigators were preparing to address the media. Now the truth comes out. Green will face charges, and so will the people protecting him. This is only the beginning, but it's a start. Lucas nodded, the weight of everything finally beginning to lift off his shoulders. Do you think it'll change anything? The system, I mean. Amaya's expression turned thoughtful. Change takes time, but accountability is the first step. People need to see that no one is above the law, not even those who wear the badge. And if we hold the right people accountable, the system can start to heal. Lucas glanced back at the crowd of reporters and bystanders, a flicker of hope rising in his chest. Maybe this time it's different. The news broke that evening. Officer Martin Green arrested on charges of unlawful detainment, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Headlines flashed across screens nationwide, sparking conversations about systemic abuse of power, racial profiling, and corruption within law enforcement. Amaya's role in exposing the network made her a hero to some and a target to others, but she accepted it without hesitation. The truth mattered more than the noise. At the NSA field office, Amaya watched the news reports with her team, the the room quiet but charged with purpose. "This is a victory," her colleague said. "Green and his protectors are going to prison." "It's a step forward," Amaya corrected, though her expression was resolute. "But the work isn't done. We still need to dismantle the rest of the network. Do you think they'll retaliate?" Amaya's gaze was steady. "They'll try, but we'll be ready." Lucas sat in his living room, the glow of the television casting shadows on the walls. He watched as the news anchor recapped the day's events, his name mentioned briefly for his role in exposing the corruption. His phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, some supportive, others bitter. A text came through from an unknown number. "You did the right thing. Proud of you." Lucas stared at the message for a moment before smiling faintly. He didn't need to know who sent it. He'd done what was right, and that was enough. As he turned off the TV, Lucas allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in weeks: peace. The following week, Amaya stood at a podium during a press conference, her presence commanding as she addressed the nation. "This case has shown us the dangers of unchecked power and the harm caused when accountability is ignored," she said. "But it has also shown us what can happen when people stand up, speak out, and refuse to accept corruption as the norm. Change is possible, justice is possible, but only if we continue to demand it." The crowd erupted into applause as Amaya stepped back, her message delivered. Later that evening, as the sun set over the city, Amaya walked through the quiet streets, her mind turning over the events of the past weeks. She knew this victory was only one battle in a much larger war, but it mattered. The system wasn't perfect. It was flawed, fractured, and still deeply biased. But as long as there were people willing to challenge it, willing to demand justice, there was hope. Amaya stopped at a bench and sat down, staring out at the horizon. Green thought he was untouchable. They all did. But now the world knew better. And so did she.